When I'm making my videos, my favorite things to talk about are locations with some in-depth lore and not just some families and houses. So luckily for me, the Riverlands has some fun history. Just judging by the geography and weather, this kingdom should be a very comfortable place to live, but it's the exact opposite. The Riverlands share its borders with every kingdom aside from Dorne, so this led to continuous wars for territory. To make things worse, there aren't many natural defenses, so the people here have been easy targets. It isn't too hard to guess, the Riverlands gets its name from all the rivers and bodies of water scattered throughout the kingdom. The ruling family has changed a few times in this story's history, but the Riverlands belonged to House Tully when the current story began. They were named Lord Paramount of the Trident by the Targaryens when they united the Seven Kingdoms, so the Tullys were never kings. Their castle is called Riverrun. The Tullys were smart when they decided where they would build their home. Because of all the water around Riverrun, it's almost like an island that's very difficult to invade. The castle has that classic moat design with a water gate where boats can enter. This was where the double marriage took place when Ned Stark and Jon Arryn married the sisters Catelyn and Lysa Tully during Robert's Rebellion. Ned and Cat's firstborn son Robb was born here while Ned was off fighting in the war. The most iconic part of the Riverlands is the Trident. It's this massive river that spreads across the kingdom. I've only started this video and we already have a fish sigil for the Tullys and a river called the Trident, all within a kingdom called the Riverlands, so you can tell George Martin likes to write his work in themes. The Trident is made up of 3 forks, the red, green, and blue fork. The red fork gets its name from the mud and clay in this area. This part of the river is wide and slow. The Battle of the Trident was a deciding battle during Robert's Rebellion. A crossing over the red fork called the Ruby Ford gets its name for being the location where Robert Baratheon killed Rhaegar Targaryen. Rhaegar wore armor with rubies all over it, and after Robert shattered his chest, the rubies went flowing into the red fork. By these shores is a place called the Inn of the Kneeling Man. This is the location where King Torrhen Stark bent the knee and swore fealty to Aegon the Conqueror after his army saw its dragon. This inn even has a sign at the front door of this event painted on it. The Blue Fork is named after its clear waters that comes from springs. The village Ramford and the large town Fairmarket are on its shores. Long ago, there was a family from First Man descent that were the first kings to rule over the entire Trident. House Mud were called the kings of the rivers and hills, and their home was along the Blue Fork. The castle is now called Oldstones, but its real name is lost in history. They ruled for 1,000 years, but were defeated when the Andals invaded from Essos. The Green Fork has green waters since this fork of the river starts the Neck, which is a swamp, all the way up in the north. Across the northern part of the Green Fork, House Frey built a bridge across the river. A castle on each side of the bridge makes up their home called the Twins. They began charging tolls to cross the bridge and became very wealthy very quickly. It was somewhere near the Trident where Arya chases off her direwolf Nymeria so it wouldn't be killed for biting Joffrey. In the forests of this region, Nymeria leads a large pack of wolves that terrorize this area. Arya is actually a warg in the books, and when looking through her direwolf's eyes, Catelyn Stark's corpse is pulled out of the Green Fork by Nymeria and later found by Beric and Thoros. Another lore-heavy body of water is the God's Eye. It's the largest lake in all the Seven Kingdoms and is just south of the Trident. One of the cooler fights in this story happened above this lake. When the Targaryens were in the middle of their civil war, 2 Targaryens and their dragons had a duel in the skies. It ended with the dragons falling out of the sky and into the lake after dealing some serious damage to each other. At the center of the lake is an island called the Isle of Faces. The long war between the First Men and the Children of the Forest ended here. Their pact was signed and the two lived peacefully together in Westeros. Every weirwood tree on the island had a face carved on it, and even in the current story there were a ton of weirwoods here. Something called the Order of the Green Man was formed. The Green Man would guard over the weirwoods. We don't know a lot about these guys, but when the Andals came around, they weren't able to defeat them. That says a lot about their power, because the Andals were conquering entire kingdoms, including the Riverlands, but weren't able to destroy the Green Man. Howland Reed spent a winter on this island when he went searching for the Green Man 20 years before the current story begins. What he learned and experienced is a mystery, but House Reed of the Neck does have some connections with the Children of the Forest. After his time here, Howland traveled to Harrenhal, where he heard the tourney of Harrenhal would be taking place. Because of this tourney, he would meet and become close with Ned Stark and the rest of the family. This is also the tourney where Rhaegar and Lyanna would meet for the first time, which would lead to Robert's Rebellion soon after. Harrenhal is near the shores of the God's Eye, and is the largest castle in the Seven Kingdoms. At one point, the Riverlands were conquered by the Storm Kings of the Stormlands. The Storm Kings were defeated by House Hoare of the Iron Islands. House Horror were the king of the Iron Islands at the time, and after defeating the Storm Kings in the Riverlands, they became the kings of the isles and rivers. They picked out the best location to build this castle since the land was fertile and would make them rich. After 40 years of construction, the castle was complete. The day the king of the isle and rivers moved in, Aegon Targaryen arrived and had his dragon burn the castle. House Horror went extinct from burning within this massive castle, and what was left was given to House Coeres. They were of Valyrian descent like the Targaryens, but would also go extinct shortly after. It was then given to House Harroway. One of the lords of this family had a town named after him. Lord Harroway's town is probably one of the weaker names in the series. House Harroway would also go extinct after a few short years in Harrenhal. I think you guys see the trend happening here. House Towers, House Strong, House Lothsome, House Went, and House Slint would all spend a short time ruling over Harrenhal. This place is considered to be cursed, and people believe any house that comes into its possession won't last much longer. It's under Peter Baelish's rule while he's living in the Vale right now. A little north of here is the Inn at the Crossroads. The name comes from the location being where some of the major roads of the Seven Kingdoms meet. It's between the King's Road that runs from the north to the south, the High Road that runs east to the Vale, and the River Road that runs west to the Westerlands. The family that runs this inn has had some serious tragedies inflict them throughout the books. That brutal fight between Arya and the Hound against the Mountain's men happens at this inn. The Hound gets injured to the point where he can't travel anymore, so Arya leaves him behind on the way to Saltpans. This is the town where Arya hops aboard a ship to go to Braavos. Where the Trident becomes the Bay of Crabs is an island called the Quiet Isle, where men come who are seeking forgiveness for their sins. They are so devout to the faith that they never speak. They are only allowed to speak when they are confessing their sins. A bunch of bodies have been washing on these shores lately. Because of the war, the Riverlands have been hit very hard. The gravedigger who has been handling the corpses is very likely to be the Hound, but it isn't confirmed in the books like it is in the show, because the men also cover their faces here. House Mountain, who were once minor kings, rule a walled town called Maidenpool. The origin of its name is a little weird. A knight who was also a fool spied on some sisters taking a bath in a pool of water, and the name Maidenpool was born. The other town with walls is a Stony Sept. This was where Robert Baratheon was hiding during his rebellion after getting injured. The Targaryen army searched the houses but couldn't find him. The townspeople were moving Robert around avoiding his capture until Ned Stark came to their rescue. A couple castles in this area belong to one same family. House Vance descend from the Andals, who defeated the last Mud King of the Trident. They would become minor kings later on. One branch of the Vance family rule in Atlanta, while the other lives at Wayfarer's Rest. A lot of the houses in the Riverlands have been given exact locations, but have very little written about them, so I'll just show their sigils with their castle's name, along with any other place I don't have much to say about. So let me talk about some of the interesting places like Highheart. This was once a sacred place to the children of the forest. A circle of weirwood trees were at the top of the hill, but are nothing but stumps now after the Andal invasion. Highheart is believed to be haunted because of what the Andals did to the children and their trees, so the small folk stay away from this hill. A mysterious character has her home here. She's called the Ghost of Highheart and has an unsettling appearance. She's a very old, 3-foot-tall woman with pale skin and red eyes. If you guys are aware of the prince that was promised prophecy, she was responsible for having the Mad King Aerys Targaryen II marry his sister, believing the promised prince would be born out of their line. Her prophecies are trusted enough that the Brotherhood Without Banners visit her when they need her guidance. She freaks out when she sees Arya, believing her to be associated with death. One of the cooler places in the Riverlands doesn't have a location given. The Brotherhood Without Banners also meet with an old woman called the Lady of the Leaves. After they blow into a horn, rope ladders drop from the trees that lead to a hidden village in the higher branches. While this hidden village has been keeping whoever lives here safe from the war that has been turning the Riverlands into hell, it won't be able to keep them safe during the winter when the leaves all fall and reveal their creative solution. Some of the children of the forest lived in similar fashion. At the very top left of this kingdom is the Cape of Eagles. It's right off the coast of Iron Man's Bay, which is unfortunate because of how close they are to the Iron Islands. The castle in this area is a fortress to defend against the Ironborn raids. The Ironborn once controlled the Cape of Eagles until House Mallister of Seaguard defeated them. His family was also minor kings. The last two houses that I'm going to talk about are probably my favorite part of the Riverlands. House Blackwood of Raventree Hall and House Bracken of Stonehenge are neighboring houses close to Riverrun. These two houses have an ancient rivalry that throughout the years keep reigniting. Their fights are usually due to land disputes. When a Targaryen king had a mistress from each of these two houses, he would have two bastards who would change the story's history. With his Bracken mistress, he had a son named Aegor Rivers, and with his Blackwood mistress, he had Brendan Rivers. They would grow up to be known as Bittersteel and Bloodraven, with Bloodraven also being the three-eyed raven. Their rivalry is probably the most heated in the entire series. It's to the point where they even fought several wars against each other. The Blackwoods have kind of been written as the good guys, and the Brackens, not so good. House Blackwood actually originate from the north, which explains their connection to weirwood trees and ravens that's on their sigil. They were a powerful family in the north, but were ran out of the Wolf's Wood by the Stark Kings. There's a giant dead weirwood tree by Raventree Hall. For thousands of years, a large flock of ravens would appear here at night. The family believes their weirwood tree died after being poisoned by the Brackens. They still worship the old gods. Both families ruled as kings long ago. A man and a woman from each family once came together and had a bastard child. His name was Benedict Justman, and would rise up to rule all the Riverlands. House Justman ruled for 300 years before going extinct. So this kingdom has had a lot of changes in ruling families and territory. And in the current story, a lot of the villages and houses are in ruin because of the war. That's where I'm going to end this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and my next one on the Vale is on the way.